What's going on, everyone? So, Waves is the latest A24 film from director Trey Edward Schultz, same director that did It Comes at Night, as well as Krisha. That's all you really need to know, honestly, going into this movie. That's all I knew, basically. But for those of you that need a little premise, a little bit of juiciness to, obviously perk your interest, let me explain the premise. So, the premise, for those of you who don't know, is about a suburban family that traces their journey as they navigate love, forgiveness, and coming together through a tragic event. This is a film that also stars Alexa Damia, Sterling K. Brown, Taylor Russell, Calvin Harris Jr., Lucas Hedges, and a slew of other actors and actresses. This is a movie that's stacked in terms of cast members, and the cast does such a great job. This is a movie that if you're just looking for great acting, you'll be satisfied because the acting here that you're witnessing, it's so raw and emotional that you can't help but get caught up with these characters. And I really appreciate that the acting matches the character development because I think the character development in this film, for the most part, is really good. I'll get into that in the negatives, but for the most part, it's good stuff. I also love the cinematography. The cinematography in this movie is, I loved it. And I'm going to get into that. And I normally don't talk too much. I mean, obviously, if you guys have been following me, you guys know I talk about cinematography a lot, but I'm going to get into it a little bit more with this because I think with this movie especially, it's important to talk about it in terms of positives. So this movie's cinematography, it's dealing with the first half, the camera is constantly moving. There's not a second goes by where the camera is not moving. It's not doing fancy camera work. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong. It's great. But the second half, that's not the case. It slows down considerably. It's a lot of long takes. Camera's not moving at all. And it's because, and again, I'm not spoiling anything, the first half and the second half follows two different characters. Two different characters that this in itself, the cinematography acts as a character because it's two different characters, you can almost look at it as that's the reason why the two halves are two completely different movies almost because it's dealing with two different characters and people are different and it goes to show it because the two halves are in itself really different. I love that about this movie. I think it's really unique and effective, in my opinion, with garnering the movie's emotional heft. I think that's really good stuff that this movie was dealing with. And the aspect ratio also plays into that, in my opinion, because aspect ratios do change, as do the transition of the characters that this movie's focusing on. That in itself, I also really dug. But that's not just something that I think is a stylistic choice. Again, it comes down to the writing. I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like Trey Edwards Schultz literally wrote this film and was thinking about all this. And I think that is awesome. Also, I wanted to mention that I really, really dug the ambitions of the storytelling. I mean, when I mentioned the character development and the cinematography and how both are interwoven, the story in itself is also interwoven with all those. Because with the way this story is told, it's done in a slow burn fashion, but it's effective because each scene you're able to pick apart certain things that help you with identifying and figuring out with these characters and even the messages and the themes that this movie's dealing with. Because of all that, you're able to pick back all these layers in a really interesting way. I mean, this movie's dealing with, for crying out loud, the themes and messages of toxic masculinity, men versus women, grief, loss, religion, community, all these things that this movie's tackling. It's doing so in a way that feels wholesomely original, whilst even though it's taking from like Paul Thomas Anderson, Darren Aronofsky filmmaking style. But as I always say, filmmakers, especially ones that are first starting out, when they're still trying to find their voice, they're taking from other filmmakers in terms of stylistic choices, ones that they love. And I get that. I completely understand that. And I feel like with Trey Edward Schultz, he's still finding his voice. Like, I think you already know stylistically his movies by now, but he's still finding his voice. And I like how he's taking from really good directors like Paul Thomas Anderson and Darren Aronofsky in terms of filmmaking style. All that said, though, I did have some problems with the movie. Sure, I loved the ambition. I loved the storytelling. I loved the acting. I loved the cinematography. But I did have some problems. So, for one, you have Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross doing the score. That's not a problem. If anything, that's amazing. I was giddy for joy when I saw that they were doing the score for this movie. But unfortunately, they weren't really utilized. Their talent wasn't really utilized for this movie that much. You have a couple scenes early on in the beginning of the movie where you hear the score and it's awesome. It's like good stuff. And then the second half comes around and it's just a bunch of, songs. It's not their actual work. And I guess one could argue, and again, this is where I get into conflicting territory, one could argue that the first half is dealing with their score, and then the second half is dealing with soundtrack because it's two different characters. And I get that, but also I don't like it when you're wasting talent because these two composers are incredible. If you've ever listened to the score of Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Patriots Day, or Watchmen, which is airing right now, they're great composers. They know what they're doing, but they weren't really utilized, and I think that's my biggest qualm with this movie. I also I also think that this movie, whilst I really do respect the fact that the first half and second half are two different movies and focus on two different things, I do think that the second half, in terms of rewatchability, there is a problem in that it slows down considerably. I think that's just by nature a problem, just because of the fact that they're dealing with a lot of things and they want to take their time, and it goes into a different direction, and I'm fine with that. But because it's dealing with one character in the first half and one character in the second half, there are two other characters that get sidelined. The parents, they don't really get that much development. I think that when the characters are on screen, they're really interesting. I love the parents in this movie, but unfortunately, they don't really get that much. And I kind of almost wish that the second half focused on, um, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but certain family members. I wish that they had focused on certain family members more so it would have been even more fleshed out. So, whilst I mentioned at the beginning of this room that I really liked, obviously, the character development, I do think that those two characters should have had more screen time, especially in the second half. But all that said, Waves, I do think is a good movie. I really respect it. I love that A24 is continuing to give, these filmmakers all this, free reign to do whatever they want. And it shows because this is a movie that, whilst is kind of unwieldy in terms of, it kind of gets a little meandering in the second half, I do really respect the fact that this filmmaker had the ambition and the guts to make a movie like this. And at the same time, I do think it's an important movie that I would definitely recommend that you give it a shot because it is a good film. And that's why Waves, for me personally, I'm going to give it a 4.25 out of 5-star rating, which, for this like a hot sauce rating, it's the good old Louisiana Pure Crystal hot sauce. That's right. I thought it was a good movie, guys. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Waves. What did you think about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And I know I was kind of meandering myself a bit, but I guess it's kind of fitting for the movie. But nonetheless, guys, Waves, what did you think about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Did you think it was good, great, bad? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.